In this session, we want to look at what might sound like a controversial subject. It's called the maternal heart of God. Many of us have studied the father heart of God because God is our Father. And I know there are some organizations that will have a whole part of their discipleship program on the father heart of God. But the question is, where does the maternal heart come from? Where does the mother's heart come from? It came from somewhere, and it came from the Creator, the designer of feminine, the designer of female. So the maternal heart is rooted in the nature and character of God. We see this illustrated in Matthew 23:37. Jesus is sitting probably on the Mount of Olives, because in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives is outside the city and it is higher than the city of Jerusalem itself. And he would go there to pray. And we find him reflecting, overlooking the city of Jerusalem. We find Jesus saying these words, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." We hear in these words the plaintive heart, the maternal heart. In this case, the mother bird wanting to call her chicks together, spread her wings over her chicks to protect them. And this is Jesus crying out to the city of Jerusalem. We see here the maternal heart of God. And God has, yes, a paternal heart and a maternal heart. The great painter Rembrandt, I think, understood this. This is his painting, The Return of the Prodigal Son. And we all know the story of the prodigal son. A man had two sons. The younger son was impetuous and wanted his inheritance before his father died. So he went to his father, asked for his inheritance. The father gave him the inheritance, and he went out and squandered it. And within a short period of time, his money was gone. He was embarrassed to go back home, but he needed food, so he went to work on a pig farm. And we all know how Jews thought of pigs. They were filthy, they were unholy, and for a young Jewish boy to be working on a pig farm, it didn't get any lower than that. And one day this young man realized that he could go home to his father and become a slave in his father's household, and he would live in a better condition than he was on the pig farm. So he goes home to ask his father if he can return and just be a servant in the household. And as he's approaching the house, the father sees him coming, runs out of the house, runs down the road, and embraces his son. And it's at that moment that Rembrandt captures this story. I want you to look carefully at the hands of the father as he embraces his son. What do you see in these hands? Are they identical? No. They're not. Look closely. And what you see as you look at these hands, one is thick. The one that is the left hand of the Father is thick and muscular. The one that is the right hand of the Father is thinner, and the fingers are longer and thinner. Rembrandt had the ability to paint two identical hands, but he did not. And he did not for a reason, because he understood something of the Father's heart. So he paints a female hand and a male hand to show that God's nature, the Father heart, comes from our Father in heaven, but so does the maternal heart. Before I go further, I need to make a distinction between a metaphor and a simile. And if I don't do this, you could leave walking away from this session saying, oh, Darrow said that God is a mother. No, I am not saying God is a mother. A metaphor says that the whole of one thing is the same as the whole of another thing. A simile says that a part of one thing compares, it's similar to the part of another thing. So a metaphor, if I were to say God is a mother, that's a metaphor. And if I were to say that, I would hope that you know the scriptures well enough to call me a heretic, because I would be a heretic. The idea that God is a mother is a pagan concept. It is not a biblical concept. But the Bible speaks in terms of simile. And a simile is that a part of one thing is similar to the part of another thing. And so we can say that God is like a mother. And we can say a mother is like God. So please hear this distinction as we go forward. God is like a woman giving birth. God is like a nursing mother. God is like a mother hen. And God is like a mother eagle. And these are similes in Scripture talking about God being like. John Piper, a pastor in the United States, said this: all things exist to demonstrate something about God's infinite perfection. All things exist to demonstrate something of God's infinite perfection. And to my sisters who are watching this, God has made you, and your body demonstrates to the world something of God's infinite perfection. If you turn to Romans chapter 1, verses 19 through 20, Paul makes this particular argument that God reveals himself not only through this book, but God reveals himself through his works, through what he has made. We all know that this book is God's special revelation. It is. But God has not limited his revelation to the book. He has revealed himself through his creation, through his works. We can say it this way: he's revealed himself through his word and he has revealed himself through his works. And Paul describes that in Romans 1:19 through 20. He says, because that which may be known of God is manifested in them, for God has shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. God has revealed himself to all human beings through his creation. And then he makes this argument. He has revealed himself in two ways. First, he's manifested himself in them. He has made us in his image. We are made creatures who can think, who can analyze, who have moral motions, who can make moral decisions. We are made in the very image of God, and we can look at ourselves and reflect on our own existence, and we can conclude that we are more than rocks, we are more even than animals. We can look inside ourselves. He has manifested himself in human beings, in our being made in his image. And he has manifested himself outside of us in the external creation. People in another generation would say, here you have Aristotle and Plato. Plato is a reflection of reason, of man's ability to reason and analyze. Aristotle is reflecting of man's ability to look at creation and draw certain conclusions from what is out there. So you have revelation, special revelation, you have reason, and you have reality. These are the three books, we could call them, where God has revealed himself. And here, Paul is arguing, people can look at what God has made, and if they conclude there is no God, they are without excuse. I'd like us, for a moment, to think of Rembrandt. We saw the picture of the prodigal son. Now, if we were in Holland today and went to a museum that displayed Rembrandt's paintings, what can you learn about Rembrandt by looking at his paintings? What can you learn? Now, if you were talking, we can look at one side of it, the artistry, but we could also look at the technical way he painted. How did he put the base down? What kinds of brushes did he use? How did he use textures? There'd be all sorts of things that we could learn about Rembrandt simply by looking at what he made. Now, imagine we are in this museum. We've enjoyed the day, and as we're walking out, we're talking about what we have seen. And one of our friends said, you know, this was an amazing day. The trouble is there was no Rembrandt. What would you say to that friend? You're crazy. Where did these paintings come from? They just dropped out of the sky? They just materialized on the wall? No, you'd say to your friend, you're absolutely crazy. But this is what we do all the time. Because the ideology of Darwin says there is no God. In the face of what he has made, they can say there is no God. And Paul says they are without excuse because God's revealed himself so clearly through the things that he has made. What can you learn about God by looking at these flowers? What can you learn about God by looking at just these flowers? Not talking about all creation, just these flowers. What do these flowers reveal to you about God? If we were asking somebody who is more of a scientist, they would look at a different angle of it. How do flowers work? How do you take brown earth and produce this? There'd be all sorts of chemical things we'd be talking about, hydrology, the movement of water. There'd be all sorts of things revealed if we were looking through the eyes of a scientist or a technical person. We can learn a lot about God by looking at what he has made. One of the things that I like to point out is that God is a romantic. How many women who are watching this love to receive flowers? And to the men who are watching this, when was the last time you gave your girlfriend or your wife flowers? God is romantic. He has given us flowers. So we can learn a lot about God through the things that he has made. And my sisters, he has made you. And he has made your body. And what can we learn about God by examining the female body? The female body was made for a purpose. Purpose to compassionate, to nurture, to protect. The concrete reality of a female body reveals to anyone who will see the transcendent nature of God's compassion, his nurture, and his protection. A woman's body is functional, but it is not merely functional. It is functional. It has a physicalness to it. And it was designed for a particular purpose. But it's not merely functional. It also has the purpose to reveal something of God's transcendent nature, because he has designed in the female body something that says to the world, I am here. This is what I am like. It has the ability to reveal the maternal heart of God. So a woman's body was made for a purpose. It has a functional purpose, but it also has a transcendent purpose. It is to reveal something of the nature of God, because he has revealed both his existence and his character through the things that he has made. Having a mother is one of the most rudimentary things in life. We all came from the womb of a woman. Every one of us has a mother. We were all carried inside a mother's womb. Most of us received our first nourishment from our mother's breast, and we were held in our mother's arms. We find in Scripture three powerful similes. The first is womb love, and this speaks of God's compassion. We see nurturing breasts, and this speaks of God's sufficiency. And then we read of the maternal arms, the mother's arms, or the sheltering wings. And this reveals God's protection. And I'd like to take a few moments and look at each of these similes. So first is womb love. Speaks of God's compassion. God has revealed to us not only himself through what he's made, but he reveals something about himself through his names. And we could take a half hour, an hour, and simply list the different names that God has identified himself with. He is God. He is El Shaddai. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the Prince of Peace. And we could go on and on. We probably could come up with 100 or 200 names where God has identified himself by name. And one of his names is compassion. In fact, it is said that Exodus 34, 6 through 7 is the longest name of God in the Bible. And in this passage where he identifies himself, he says that I am the compassionate and gracious God. The Hebrew word compassion is raham, and it means to love deeply, to have mercy, to be compassionate, to have tender affection. 30 times this word is translated mercy. 4 times it's translated compassion. And 4 times it's translated womb. For those of you who are women watching this video, God had something in mind when he designed you. And one of the things that he had in mind was to demonstrate through your body his compassion. He sculpted in your body a place, the place of compassion, the womb. We see this exhibited in 1 Kings 3, 16 through 28. It's the story of 2 women, 2 prostitutes in fact, and they each had a baby. And one evening, as the women were sleeping, one of the babies died. And the mother whose baby died took her dead baby into the neighbor's bedroom and put her dead baby in the neighbor's bed and took the neighbor's live baby back to her room. The next morning, the neighbor woke up, saw the dead baby, thinking it was her own. She began to mourn, and then she realized as she looked at the baby more clearly that this was not her baby. Later in the day, she saw her neighbor carrying her baby. And she said, "That's my baby. I want my baby back." And the neighbor said, "No, this is my baby." And they argued about whose baby it was. And then they said, "Well, let's go to King Solomon, because King Solomon is wise, and he will be able to determine who the real mother is." So they took the baby to King Solomon, and he says, "Bring me a sword, and we will cut the baby in two and give half the baby to each of the mothers." That will be equitable. They'll each get half. And then the scriptures say, "The woman whose son was alive was filled with compassion for her son, and said to the king, 'Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him.'" And immediately Solomon knew who the mother was. It wasn't by magic that he knew who the mother was. How did he know who the mother was? What was he looking for? He was looking for womb love. And when he found womb love, he knew who the mother was. The second is nurturing breasts. And this is God's sufficiency. One of the names of God is El Shaddai. And we often sing a beautiful chorus about El Shaddai. And El Shaddai means the all-sufficient one, the satisfier, the Almighty. And this name is found 48 times in the Old Testament. And it comes from the root word shad, and that means breast. El, the God, shad, breast. It means the one who nourishes, the one who supplies, the one who satisfies. God is the breasted God, as it were. God is the one who nourishes, who supplies, who satisfies. Now, what I want to share with you now, I owe to my wife, both my wife as a mother and what I learned from her, watching her as a mother. But my wife was also a labor and delivery nurse and a postpartum nurse. So she worked with women and newborn babies. And at a period in her life, she wanted to coach women in how to breastfeed, because breastfeeding in North America is a lost art, because the bottle has replaced the breast, because we want to get on to more important things in North America. And with a bottle, you can do other things. And so the art of breastfeeding has largely been lost. So she spent 6 months studying to be a lactation therapist. And she'd come home at night and she'd be all excited from her class, and she'd open the door, run in, and say, "Darrow, I can't believe that people study a woman's breast and don't conclude there's a God." And then I'd say, "What did you learn tonight?" And she'd have something exciting to share with me. And one of the first nights she came in and said that, and she began to talk about bonding, maternal and infant bonding. And bonding with the mother actually begins in the womb. That the baby in the womb begins to learn things about the mother. The baby hears the mother's heartbeat, the rhythm of her heart. The baby can distinguish between the mother's voice and the mother tongue of the mother and the voice of another woman or another language. The baby in the womb can hear the music that the mother is playing. The baby can learn in the womb the pace of the mother's reading when she reads out loud. The bonding begins in the womb, not outside the womb. It continues outside the womb, but it begins in the womb. The baby can learn the mother's culinary tastes through the spices that come into the mother's body and come in to the milk of the baby. So mothers and infants bond even before the baby leaves the womb. Being There is a book written by Erica Commissar. It's a remarkable book on the importance of time spent being there, being present with the mother and the baby. And she writes this: mothers are unique in their connection to their babies from an intrinsic biological and emotional perspective. From the moment they enter the world, babies know the difference between their mothers and everyone else. And they know the difference from the moment they enter the world because they have been in the mother's womb and have been learning while they have been in the womb. This woman, in her book, the subtitle is The First 1,000 Days, and the importance of the mother being there for the baby for the first 3 years. Now, this is where we have troubles today, because today in the modern world, where is a woman's value found? In the marketplace. And to get into the marketplace after you've had a baby, you don't hang out with the baby. You go back to work. That is what is normal today. But the importance of that maternal infant bonding in the first 1,000 days is of critical importance. Commissar writes, there are studies that document just how accurately babies recognize the uniqueness of their mothers. In research, babies who were presented with a breast pad soaked with their mother's milk on one side and one with a stranger's milk on the other side turned their heads towards their mother's very specific smell. Babies will also turn towards their mother's voice, which they've heard since they were in utero, and away from the voice of another caregiver. This is what science is telling us today. Let's turn to Isaiah 49, 13 through 15. Isaiah 49, 13 through 15. Shout for joy, O heavens, rejoice, O earth, burst into song, O mountains, for the Lord comforts his people and will have compassion on his afflicted ones. But Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, the Lord has forgotten me. Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. So God is saying to Zion, to the Hebrew people, look, the mountains are celebrating, the heavens rejoice, the earth bursts into song. Why? Because the Lord comforts his people. But Zion doesn't understand that right now. Zion says, the Lord has forsaken me, the Lord has forgotten me. How many of you in your life have had a time in your life, or maybe number of times in your life, where you cry out to God and there seems to be no response? It's like your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. Those are very difficult times in life. And you say, God, where are you? One of the most difficult times in my life and my family's life was when my young grandson died at 6 months old. He was alive in the morning, well in the morning, and by the night he was dead. And I remember the pain of that. And I remember kneeling in front of his little casket, just a tiny little casket. And I looked at my dead grandson, and I cried. And I cried out to God and said, Lord, where are you? I'm an old man. You could have taken my life and spared this baby. Where are you? And everyone in the family was crying out the same way, the pain of the loss of this little baby boy. And it was if, where is God? And I think all of us know moments like this in our lives. And this is where Zion is. How can we rejoice? How can we celebrate? Because God is not listening to us. He has forsaken us. He has forgotten me. And what does God say? How does God respond? Can a mother forget the baby at her breast? It's virtually impossible for a mother to forget the baby at her breast. And have no compassion on the child she has borne. But though she may forget, I will not forget you. There is nothing more profound than the bond between a mother and her baby, the mother and the baby at the breast. But if a woman should forget that, I will not forget you. What is the source of this intimacy? It is the living God. It is the maternal heart of God that has established the mother's heart. One of the things that my wife taught me when she was taking this class was the concept of latching on and skin-to-skin contact and eye-to-eye contact. And when a baby is born, and if they take the newborn baby and do nothing but take the baby after it's born, cut the umbilical cord, put the baby on the mother's tummy, within a half hour, the baby will make its way to the mother's breast. No prompting, no touching. What is the baby hearing when the baby is in the womb? What is the first thing it hears? Hears the mother's heartbeat. That is the sound that the baby hears when the baby's ears develop, is the mother's heartbeat. And now the baby is out of the womb. And where does the baby want to be? Near the mother's heart. And the baby will make its way to that place. And what does the baby find when it gets to that place of the mother's heart? It finds nourishment. When a mother is breastfeeding her baby, where is she looking? Is she looking at her toes? Oh, I need a new pedicure. Is she looking up at, oh, there's cobwebs, I must get rid of those cobwebs. No, where is she looking when she is nursing her baby? She's looking into the face of her baby. She's looking into the eyes of her baby, because the eyes are the window of the soul. This isn't just flesh to flesh, it's soul to soul. This is yada Intimacy, intimate knowledge. The word yada is the Hebrew word for intimate knowledge. God knows us face to face. And a mother and her baby, it's yada, it's that kind of intimacy. Marilyn came home one night just all excited and she said, "Oh, guess what I learned tonight? When a baby's eyes begin to focus, the first focal length is 8 inches. What is the first thing that the baby sees when the eyes are focused? It's the face of the mother. This is the design. This just didn't happen. This is the design from the master designer who made us, who made women, who made babies, who made a relationship, a special relationship designed into them. Even the focal length. The first thing the baby sees is the face of the mother. Marilyn came home one night and she said, "Oh, they're doing experiments on women who are lactating and they're putting foreign substances into the mother's body to see what her body will do." And she said, "It is the most amazing thing that the mother's breasts produce the antibody for the baby before her body produces the antibody for itself." Wow. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. God has built into a woman's nature to nurture, to think of the other first, not of herself first. Now, she may be egotistical and, as a woman, think of herself before she thinks of her child, but what is built into her body? It's the child before herself. Another thing that Marilyn learned is that human milk is designed for human babies. An elephant's milk is designed for elephant babies. Giving an elephant baby cow's milk is not going to take care of a baby elephant's needs. What does a baby child need? The mother's milk. There's the specificity of the design built in. Erica Komisar writes this: "Not only is breast milk the ideal food for infants, but the act of breastfeeding is the most intimate connection you will ever have with another human being." By happenstance, by chance, by Darwin? No. By design. The next is the mother's arms, God's protection. We see this illustrated in Psalm 91, 1 through 4. "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be the shield and buckler." We are to live under the shadow of the Almighty, under the wings, under the feathers. The Hebrew word rahaf means to brood or to flutter, to move. And you think of a mother bird that comes and lands on the nests and settles in over the eggs, or flaps her wings over the eggs, or the baby chicks to circulate the air. This is that word. And by the way, in Genesis 1 verse 2, when it says the Spirit of God was hovering, this is that word of what a mother bird does. It hovers over at the point of creation. And we find this concept throughout the Psalms. We find it in the book of Ruth and Isaiah and in Matthew. I was sharing these things in Guatemala a number of years ago and had about 150 people in the room, mostly young people. And when I was finished lecturing, a young man put his hand up and he said, "Daryl, can I come and speak?" And I said, "Yes." And he came up to the front, to the platform, and as he was coming up, he was weeping. And by the time he got up to the front, he could hardly control his emotions. He was crying so hard. And I put my arm around him and comforted him. And when he calmed down enough, he said, "My father was machista. He was a macho man. And he'd go out drinking at night and he'd get drunk and he'd come home and he'd beat my mother and he'd beat me and he'd beat my sister. And one night he came home and he was drunker than normal. And he found his gun and came chasing me around the house. And he pulled the gun up. He had me backed into a corner. He put the gun out in front of himself and pulled the trigger. And just as he pulled the trigger, my mother jumped between the gun and me. And he began sobbing again. And he said, "She took the bullet that was meant for me." And he said, "I have never known where this love came from. And today I know. This is the heart of God." And he just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. God spreads his wings over us and shelters us under his wings. As I was writing the book that this series is based on, I had a friend who shared with me a poem that his daughter had written. Her name is Rebecca Holsapple, and the poem is called "Scars of Love." And I will end by reading her poem. "If a man came to me and said, 'I am your Christ,' I would ask him to show me his hands. I know my Christ by the love which defines his character, the love that gave him the strength and desire to give his life in exchange for mine. There is no greater love than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend. I have never seen Jesus, but he knew me, and he loved me even before I was born. He gave me life, and when my own sin threatened that life, he died on the cross to save it, and no mark was left on me. When I see him, I will know him by the scars that bear witness to the unfathomable magnitude of his love for me. I know my mother by the love which defines her character, the love that gave her the strength and desire to offer her life in exchange for mine. There is no greater love than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend. My mother knew me and loved me even before I was born. She gave me life. When I was a baby, 12 stone steps threatened that life. But she held me so tight and close that every cut and bruise fell on her own body, and no mark was left on me. So, Mother, If when I go to heaven, I don't recognize you, show me the scars on your arms that bear witness to the unfathomable magnitude of your love for me. This is the maternal heart. And the maternal heart is born out of the heart of God.